Hi, I'm Tony Houston. I'm the local history librarian here at Blodgett Library, and I want to welcome you to another episode of Your Story is Fishkill Story. Today we're interviewing Denise Doring VanBuren, the President General of the National Society Daughters of the American Revolution, a vibrant organization of over 190,000 members. And Denise, I think I forgot to mention that a lot of people would know you better as the announcer on News Center 6 or as the voice of Central Hudson, where you worked and you eventually retired as the Vice President of Public Affairs.
I did. What a wonderful career I had, and what a joy it was to work at a company that was so committed to all of the communities that it serves. A really grand tradition there of devotion to local towns, villages, and cities. I joined Central Hudson in 1993 initially as the spokesperson after having had that career in local radio and television, and they were kind enough to actually finance my master's degree at Mount St. Mary College in Newburgh. I went to school for 7 years at night with small children in order to further my education. But as a result of that, I was promoted to be an officer of the corporation in 1999. And when I retired on January the 1st of 2020, with more than 20 years as an executive officer of the company, I established a record as the longest serving female executive in the history of the company. So it was a joy to serve and to work alongside people who really are, again, so committed to our local communities.
So Denise, have you always been interested in genealogy?
Well, I would say that history has always been an interest. My parents were both great storytellers and memory keepers for our own particular family, but we also were the kind of family that spent a lot of time visiting local historic sites and even factories or mills where things have been produced, where neighborhoods of their childhood. So I always grew up with a love of local history and that kind of raconteur tradition in my family. I would say that I didn't officially begin the genealogical quest in a formal way until I really arrived here down in Dutchess County. I had graduated from college, and this was my first job in television. Our studio at the time was located on Route 52 in Beacon, and my mother famously said to me, "Why don't you join the DAR and make some friends?"
One of the things I like about DAR is that it's women supporting other women.
And when you're united like that in a purpose and a cause with other women, there is nothing that can stop us. We're really a force. I have met so many astounding, smart, bright, patriotic, committed women from around the world who share with me a vision of support for our country. We love our nation. The original motto of DAR is actually Amor Patriae, love of country. It's changed ultimately to God, home, and country over the years. But we are united by a love of these United States of America and a commitment that we will fulfill the promise that was sacrificed by our patriot ancestors and that we owe to our generations who will come. We want to make sure that what these men and women did to achieve independence in 1776, the values that they fought for, the liberties that they won on our behalf, are carried down and appreciated by all the Americans who will follow. And the more than century since, we have assisted tens of thousands of Americans through our work in ways such as providing scholarships. Our national, state, and local scholarships total more than $1 million annually. Assisting veterans, we're typically the largest volunteers at VA medical centers, supporting active duty service personnel in myriad ways, from sending them cards and holiday packages to providing things where allowed at various military bases and posts. I'm also immensely proud of the ways that our organization stepped forward during COVID to respond to their neighbors in need. Certainly we had essential frontline workers, women who are in the medical fields or educational fields, retail fields who continue to work on their jobs. But our members voluntarily stepped forward and also sewed more than 1 million masks. It was critically important in the early weeks and months of the pandemic. But as time went on, we were able to match organizations in need with our volunteers from across the country who could sew these masks for them. Places like the Navajo Nation, where they needed masks for not only adults but children in the school system, and we were able to connect our DAR chapters around the country with the Navajo Nation to provide these masks. More than 1 million sewn and provided so far. I'm very proud of that, and it's just one example of many of the ways that DAR is involved and engaged and continues the legacy of our patriot ancestors. We sponsor essay contests to raise appreciation for American history, but we also have a literacy committee to help those for whom English is a second language. We have an Americanism committee that welcomes new citizens through supportive naturalization programs. We have a conservation committee for those who enjoy preserving our great natural resources. And we have lots of committees for genealogy research and digitization of records and indexing of existing historical sources so that more people can find their family's connections to American history.
With all the interest in genealogy, that's one of the main things I do here in the local history room at Blodgett Library, is help people do their research for their Fishkill ancestors. And I have this giant Fishkill tree that I just dump everybody into. I have about 16,000 people in it.
I just adore people who appreciate local history and enjoy researching it and being fact-based about it, taking it seriously, but also celebrating it, the joy of it. These were people's lives and their stories, and together they create this tapestry that is our community.
In honor of interviewing you today, I wore this pin which belonged to my great-great-grandmother, Elizabeth Charlotte Martzel Dalzell, who was born in 1827. And one of your revolutionary patriots is Simon Freer from Poughkeepsie.
That's exactly right, who actually took his oath of loyalty to the colonists, to this new American cause, this brave decision to break with the king at Griffin's Tavern. And so I'm really proud of that. I'm also proud of the fact that my children, their father and his line actually goes back even farther here in the town of Fishkill. In fact, his ancestors during the American Revolution guarded the port at Fishkill Landing. So for my children, both sides of their family go back to the Revolutionary War period and in fact to New Netherlands. I wish more people appreciated all of the significant events that occurred here and all of the generations of families that, that built this town and were part of not only the American Revolution, but World War I and World War II, who survived the Great Depression and raised their children here. The people who were here during, the Great Migration, when all the IBMers came in, and frankly in the 90s, when all the IBMers left. I'll tell you a chapter of my own history that a lot of folks may not be aware of, and that is the fact that in 1989, I had cancer, uterine cancer, was told that I probably would never be able to have children. And I was only 29 years old. That was a very frightening diagnosis for me, but it was one that I used to tell myself that if I had the opportunity to have children and to go on and to regain my health, that in fact I would make the most of every minute of every day. And so I try to do that. I'm one of those crazy people that it's a list maker. I make a lot of lists. I wake up every day and I know what my plan is, what I'm going to do, what I hope to accomplish. And for me, there is nothing better than at the end of the day to feel that sense of accomplishment. When you got all the things done on your list, when you did what you wanted to do. I know relaxation is important, and I get plenty of that, but I do think I wish more people had a sense of purpose, because there's a joy that comes from within when you do. Some of my happiest memories come from having served as regent or president of the local chapter of the DAR here in Southern Dutchess, which of course is Melzinga chapter. We were founded in 1896, and most folks know us from operating the Madam Brett Homestead, the oldest building in Dutchess County. I had the honor of serving as our chapter regent between 1998 and 2001, and I tasked myself each of those years to do something really grand. And in 1999, with the generous support of chapter members, we actually erected a bust of George Washington in the city of Beacon, which is currently on the corner of Teller and Walcott Avenues, to honor the fact that the founding father of our nation visited our community. Imagine the special place we hold in the pantheon of communities when you say, that George Washington came to your community during the Revolutionary War while he was the commander-in-chief, and we wanted to celebrate that, so we erected that bust. And then in 2000, I somehow convinced 600 people to walk to the top of Mount Beacon. Turned out to be a beautiful, hot 4th of July. I had folks sign a copy of the Declaration of Independence, and we rededicated our marker, which our predecessors had built in 1900 from native stone. And that was really special for me. It's one of my happiest memories, is that rededication ceremony. It was the centennial of our chapter's monument to the Mount Beacon fires that were placed there during the American Revolution to warn of the potential approach of the British. One of the very first acts of the Continental Congress is to establish a beacon fire signal system all the way from New England to Philadelphia, where the Continental Congress is meeting, with the expectation that should the British invade, that they'll be able to light this series of signal fires to alert them in Philadelphia. No cell phones then, not even telephone, not even telegraph, right? So these beacon fires are critically important. Do we think the one in Beacon was ever lit? Probably not, perhaps just to celebrate the end of the war, but nonetheless, it was a beacon fire that was critical, because who spends those last 18 months of the war directly across from Mount Beacon? George Washington at Washington's headquarters in Newburgh. He spends more time there during the Revolution than anywhere else, and it's our beacon fire that he's probably watching every day to see if it's lit.
And of course, that's how Mount Beacon got its name in 1913, when they voted to unite the villages of Fishkill Landing or Fishkill on Hudson, depending on which name you want to use, and Matawan, and they became the city of Beacon.
They actually, believe it or not, also considered Melzinga. In fact, that was the recommendation of the Charter Committee. And newspapers in the area made a lot of fun of the word Melzinga. It was an Indian word associated with this locale, if you will. That's why the DAR chapter chose it in 1896. But one newspaper account once something along the lines, well, they suggested, well, we'll leave the H off of Melzinga. Maybe that will make it seem more easier to pronounce. And one local newspaper said, better to toss out the Melzinga and keep just the H. So it was a controversial name. And other names were Saloon City, because Beacon had so many taverns.
I know with your love of history, you have a historic house in Chelsea, and before that, didn't you live in a historic house in Glenham?
Well, actually, so my former in-laws had a wonderful old house on the old Glenham Road, built about 1850 by Dr. Theodorus Van Wyck Anthony, which is a name that some local historians may recognize. So that was my ex-husband's family, and my wonderful sainted mother-in-law raised 9 children in that house. But since 2001, my family has actually lived on Chelsea Road in the former Thorne Dairy Farm property. The house itself, we believe, was built about 1840. And it has had many extensions and additions and crazy add-ons over the years, but it's this kind of quirky, great old farmhouse that we've come to love. Can't believe we've been there 20 years. It's been a labor of love, honestly. It had been neglected for several decades by the time we bought it, but the property is perfect for us. It has a brick barn on it with a slate roof, and our farm once adjoined the Castle Point properties. And beyond that, of course, is Stony Kill. And my children's ancestors, actually several generations of them, were born at Stony Kill in the Verplank tenant farmhouse that was built approximately the 1730s and is right near the pond as you drive past the Stony Kill property. So it's really been wonderful for me to think that I've raised my 3 sons really, as the crow flies, probably a quarter of a mile, half a mile from where their ancestors had been for generations. I've been able to connect with the descendants of the last farmer. He died in 1972, a man named Willis Thorne. He and his wife Henrietta operated it as a small dairy farm that sold its milk down into Emma Dean Farms in Beacon, a local creamery and dairy. And I connected with his descendants and actually hosted a family reunion on the property in 2017. And I think his descendants from about 7 states came. They hadn't been together on the farm since the 1960s. They came from Montana and from Maryland and from different states in the Union to relive memories of the house. And they could not believe how much character it had retained. It felt just as it did when it was their grandparents' house. I've worked very hard to ensure that it's retained its rural character, but also that the integrity and the spirit of the house has really remained intact. So I consider myself just a steward of it, and I hope someday to pass it off to one of my children or somebody else who will just love it.
So I know you have 3 sons. Are they also interested in history?
That's exactly right. I'm proud to say that all 3 of them are graduates of St. Mary's School here in the village of Fishkill. They all 3 went on to graduate from Our Lady of Lourdes in Poughkeepsie, receiving wonderful local Christian-based education, of which I'm very proud. But they all have an interest in history. All 3 of them, in their own unique way, are involved some way or another in and learning more about history. My oldest graduated from West Point and is currently stationed at Fort Carson in Colorado Springs. My second one is married and just purchased an historic home, 1820, over in the village of Montgomery. And my youngest, thanks to COVID, is back working from a home office with us back on Chelsea Road in actually the town of Wappinger. And it's really a joy to kind of share local history with him again now that he's living at home. So all three of them, unique, but all somehow very much rooted in history. They were members of the Children of the American Revolution, and they are now members of the Sons of the American Revolution.
Thank you so much for coming, Denise. This has been fascinating to hear about you and what you're doing and learning more about DAR.
And may I say thank you, Tony. As a local town historian and a member of the Daughters of the American Revolution, you give so much of yourself to ensuring that these important chapters of local history are preserved and celebrated. So I want to thank you for what you do, and Blodgett Library for all that it does to contribute to our story.
And join us next time for another episode of Your Story is Fishkill's Story.